Jordan didn't have millions, but he had enough. So he quit the 9-to-5, bought a one-way ticket, and never looked back. He built freedom, one quiet morning at a time. Watch the full story on Dollar by Dollar. How I Escaped the 9-to-5 with $50,000. Full story on the channel. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead with that all-too-familiar hum. Jordan Reyes sat at his cubicle on the 12th floor of a gray corporate building in downtown Atlanta, tapping absent-mindedly at his keyboard. The screen glared back with spreadsheets and meeting reminders, but his mind was elsewhere. Outside the window, sunlight filtered down between glass towers, but in here, it felt like a different world. Air-conditioned, silent, and sterile. For the past 5 years, Jordan had done everything right. Got the degree, landed the stable job, clocked in, clocked out. On paper, he was exactly where he should be. But inside, something had started to shift, and that shift would change everything. It started as a whisper, a question that wouldn't go away. Is this really it? Jordan wasn't unhappy exactly. He was good at his job, compliance analyst at a mid-sized logistics firm. Steady income, a reasonable boss, even decent coworkers. But it was the sameness that gnawed at him. Every week felt like a carbon copy of the last. Wake up, commute, sit, type, eat lunch from a plastic container, attend meetings that rarely mattered, repeat. And more than anything, he felt stuck, like his life had been paused in a never-ending loop. He often found himself staring at the office clock at 4:17 p.m., that awkward time when it was too early to leave but too late to start anything new. A time when he'd sit in silence, hands in his lap, wondering how much longer he could pretend this was what he wanted. One day in late November, something broke. It was a Thursday. Jordan had just wrapped up a quarterly compliance report and submitted it early. He decided to reward himself by browsing YouTube for a few minutes. An autoplay video queued up, a documentary about a young woman who reached financial independence by 30 and moved to Portugal. She had left her corporate job with $80,000 in savings, rented a small flat in Lisbon, and worked part-time online. He watched the entire video without blinking. She didn't look rich. She looked free, and something about that freedom lodged itself into Jordan's chest like a stone. Could he do the same? He had $48,300 in his savings account. He'd been quietly stacking it for years, cutting back, resisting lifestyle creep. No car loan, no credit card debt, and he just turned 29. His rent was $1,350 a month. His phone bill, $45. He lived modestly, but not cheaply. And lately, he'd been learning about remote work, writing, freelancing, even affiliate marketing. It all felt so out of reach, like something other people did. But that night, he opened a Google Doc and titled it simply, Exit Plan, 9-to-5 to Freedom. The next morning, Jordan woke earlier than usual. He packed a lunch, not out of habit, but out of intent, because from that day forward, he was on a countdown. He gave himself 6 months. 6 months to escape the 9-to-5 with at least $50,000 in the bank. Every lunch break became research time. He devoured FIRE, financial independence, retire early, blogs, watched YouTube channels about geo-arbitrage, and read deep into Reddit threads about expat life. He downloaded budgeting apps, started tracking every dollar, and canceled half his subscriptions. He was no longer surviving the workday. He was studying it, picking apart the system he was part of, learning how to game it, how to walk away. He found his energy changing. The 4:17 p.m. slumps became moments of quiet excitement. He wasn't just stuck anymore. He was planning an escape. Coworkers noticed. "You seem different lately," said Jada, the project manager who sat across from him. "Less drained." Jordan smiled. "I'm working on something." He didn't tell anyone, not even his family. Not yet. It wasn't secrecy, it was strategy. He knew how people would react. You're quitting with no job lined up. You're going to live where? Don't throw away your stability. But stability wasn't the same as freedom. And he wasn't throwing anything away. He was building toward something else. On weekends, Jordan started taking freelance writing gigs online, product reviews, blog posts, small website copy jobs. He made $200 his first month, then $450. It wasn't enough to live on, but it was proof of concept. He also tracked his spending with brutal honesty. In January, he spent $1,895. In February, $1,772. By March, he got under $1,600. He could do this. He could really do this. Still, doubt crept in. In the quiet hours before sleep, Jordan would lie awake, questioning it all. What if he failed? What if the money ran out? What if remote work wasn't sustainable? But there was something stronger than the doubt now. A vision. He could see it so clearly. Waking up in a sunny apartment in Oaxaca. Eating fresh fruit on a terrace. Working from a laptop in a quiet cafe. Owning his time. Living slowly. Intentionally. Not rich. Just free. And every time the fear came, he answered it the same way. I'd rather fail trying than live like this forever. By April, his savings hit $50,214. He'd done it. Quietly. Faithfully. Month by month. But the real milestone wasn't the money. It was what he saw in the mirror. He looked the same dark curls, same calm eyes. But inside, everything had changed. He wasn't a man waiting for life to start. He was already living it. The Monday of Jordan's last week at work came draped in mist and possibility. He woke before his alarm, the pre-dawn silence stretching across his modest studio apartment like a soft invitation. The room was clean, almost bare, just a floor mattress, a small desk with a laptop, and a stack of worn paperbacks on personal finance and philosophy. He moved slowly, intentionally, wrapping himself in the rhythm of his morning. Cold shower. French press coffee. 10 minutes of breathing with the window cracked open. There was a calmness to this final stretch, but underneath it, excitement flickered like electricity beneath the skin. This wasn't just another week. This was the last commute of his old life. The subway was half empty, the usual chorus of buzzing earbuds and plastic takeout containers filling the silence. Jordan stood near the door, one hand gripping the cold metal rail, the other holding his phone as he scrolled through a checklist titled, Final Exit, Week of June 5th, Cancel Health Insurance, Moving Abroad Plan Active, Final Freelance, Invoice Follow-Up, Notify Landlord, July 1st Departure, Goodbye Message to Team, Sell IKEA Desk, Plus Chair, Book One-Way Ticket. That last one had a green check mark. ATL Mex, June 30th, $128. He looked out the window as the subway clattered through the underground. Brick walls streaked with graffiti rushed past in flashes of red and black. The darkness. The noise. He wouldn't miss this part. Not the commute. Not the clock-in culture. Not the feeling of being boxed in by deadlines, schedules, expectations. This was the last ride in a story he was finally rewriting. His office looked the same as always. Beige walls, humming lights, the smell of oversalted instant soup wafting from the break room. But everything felt different to him now. Lighter, as if the air had changed texture. Jordan stepped into his cubicle, set his bag down, and powered up his laptop. Emails loaded like a dull tide, compliance checks, monthly memos, meeting reminders. But at the bottom, one message stood out. Subject line, Your resignation, confirmation received. His manager had processed the paperwork. Friday would be his last day. There was no going back now. And that was the best part. As the week unfolded, everything took on a strange clarity. He walked through the halls like someone revisiting a memory, taking mental snapshots he knew he'd never need again. He noticed things he had once tuned out. The way people talked about the weekend as their only joy. The way no one ever questioned whether this was it. Just waiting for raises, promotions, or better managers to improve a life they didn't love. At lunch, he watched a man stare blankly at his soup while scrolling Zillow listings he could never afford. 2 desks down, a coworker joked about how she'd fake an illness just to get a day off. This place wasn't full of bad people. It was full of tired people. People who forgot that life wasn't meant to feel like endurance. And quietly, Jordan said goodbye to all of it. Jada, his closest work friend, cornered him on Thursday. So, you're really doing this? She asked, her eyes narrowed in half curiosity, half worry. He nodded, smiling. Yeah, I fly out in 3 weeks. Where? Oaxaca, Mexico. At least for a while. She laughed, but it wasn't mean. Just startled. I thought you were joking when you mentioned that. What are you going to do? Freelance. Right. Live cheaper. Buy time, not stuff. Jada leaned against the doorframe. Honestly, I'm kind of jealous. You could do it too. I don't have a plan. Jordan nodded. Neither did I. Until I made one. That night, back in his apartment, Jordan sat with the window open and his laptop glowing on the desk. He typed slowly, crafting his farewell message. He could have gone out with silence, just slipped away. But something in him wanted to honor the transformation, to mark the ending with truth. Subject line: thank you for everything and what comes next. I've learned more in these 5 years than I ever expected to, and not just about work, but about who I am and what I value. I came here thinking stability would make me feel secure. But over time, I realized security isn't always tied to salary. It's tied to freedom, to choice. And now, I'm choosing a different path. I'm grateful for the experiences, the mistakes, the projects we nailed, and the ones that fell apart. I'm leaving, but I'm not running away. I'm moving towards something. I hope you do too. He hit send, closed the laptop, and felt the quietest joy he'd ever known. Friday was simple. No big speeches. No farewell cake. Just a few handshakes, a few warm smiles, and Jada giving him a fist bump as he walked out with his things in a canvas bag. He didn't even look back. Instead, he walked past the subway entrance and just kept walking. The sky was soft and gold, the streets buzzing with that Friday energy, people ready to escape something. Jordan didn't need to escape anymore. He was already free. At a nearby cafe, he ordered a black coffee and opened his phone. One new freelance request. A lifestyle blog wanted a piece on why I quit my job before 30. He smiled, accepted, and typed a simple reply. I can definitely write about that. I lived it. He looked up at the people around him, still in suits, checking watches, glued to screens. He didn't feel better than them, just lighter, like someone who had finally stopped carrying what wasn't his. That weekend, he listed most of his belongings online. The bookshelf, the desk chair, the microwave. He kept only what would fit in a single carry-on and one backpack. He wasn't downsizing. He was unburdening. Each item that left his apartment made space for something else. For mornings without alarms. For income that wasn't tied to location. For a life he chose, every day. The last commute wasn't about the train or the office. It was about walking away from a life built on someone else's rules. And choosing, with quiet conviction, to start his own. Jordan Reyes had done something most people never dared to consider. Walked away from a secure job with nothing more than $50,000 in his bank account and a plan etched in determination. But if you asked him what gave him the real confidence to leave, it wouldn't be the dollar amount. It was the mindset behind it. Because $50,000 was never the goal. It was the threshold, a symbol of enough. Enough to buy time. Enough to take a breath. Enough to take the leap without falling apart. And the mindset that built that $50,000 was going to be what carried him forward, long after the money was spent. Jordan's financial awakening hadn't come all at once. It wasn't a dramatic moment of debt or desperation. It was slower than that, more like erosion than explosion. When he was 24, a year into his job, he started to feel off. Every raise disappeared into lifestyle upgrades, takeout dinners, new headphones, a better apartment. But somehow, his savings account barely grew. His anxiety, however, did. He started asking questions. Why did he need $1,350 a month in rent if he spent all day at work anyway? Why was he buying new clothes for a life he didn't even enjoy? Why was self-care just a more expensive version of escaping? He didn't have answers, but he started looking. First came the books, Your Money or Your Life, The Simple Path to Wealth, Die with Zero. Then podcasts, then spreadsheets. He tracked everything, not just spending, but emotions too. How did he feel after spending $12 on lunch? After impulse ordering something from Amazon? After a weekend of bar tabs and brunch? The answers were uncomfortably honest. Spending didn't make him feel alive. It made him feel distracted. Saving made him feel powerful. It was the beginning of what he would later call his $50,000 mindset. The mindset wasn't about sacrifice. It was about clarity. He didn't cut cable because he was broke. He cut it because he didn't watch it. He didn't stop going out because he was cheap. He stopped going out because it wasn't fulfilling. Every dollar had to earn its place, not just in terms of value, but in alignment. Does this expense make me feel free, or does it make me feel trapped? That one question changed everything. By the time he reached his 28th birthday, Jordan was saving over 60% of his income. Not because he made six figures, He didn't. His annual salary hovered around $58,000. But he treated saving like survival. Not in fear, but in purpose. He cooked at home, walked when he could, bought nothing on impulse. He reused, resold, reconsidered, and most importantly, he redefined enough. He didn't chase status. He chased autonomy. That's how he stacked $50,000 in 4 years. Quietly, faithfully, without fanfare. But having the money wasn't enough. The real work was learning how to let go of the fear that came with spending it. Because if he clung to every dollar, he'd never leap. He'd stay frozen, saving and planning forever. That's why Jordan treated his $50,000 like a runway, not a vault. The money was meant to be used. Not wasted, but used strategically, thoughtfully, boldly. He created a plan. 6-month burn rate budget in Mexico. Rent, $350. Food, $250. Health insurance, $60. Co-working space, $50. Phone/internet, $30. Miscellaneous, $100. Equals $840 per month. 6 months equals $5,000. 1 year equals $10,000 with cushion. He realized something incredible. His $50,000 wasn't just enough for a sabbatical. It could buy him years of freedom, if he lived intentionally. That's when the second part of the mindset kicked in. Replenish while you run. He wouldn't burn through his savings like a tourist. He'd build while living. He doubled down on freelancing, improving his writing portfolio, taking SEO courses, learning how to pitch clients. He also explored passive income, affiliate marketing, niche blogs, digital products. Even if it took months to replace his corporate income, he wouldn't panic. Because he wasn't just chasing money anymore. He was building skills, creating options. That was the true dividend of his savings. Time to evolve. He also built what he called his freedom fund mentality. Every decision passed through 3 filters. Does this make me more free? Does this align with how I want to live? Does this bring me closer to who I want to become? If the answer was no, he didn't spend the money or the time. This shift bled into every corner of his life. He said no to high-paying gigs that required 12-hour days. He said yes to lower-paying, flexible gigs that allowed him to work from anywhere. He chose sunlight over square footage, simplicity over status. The $50,000 mindset wasn't about being frugal. It was about being free. A week before his flight, Jordan sat in a cafe downtown with his laptop open and his bank account pulled up. Checking, $3,412. Savings, $47,105. Freelance income this month, $925. It felt surreal, not because of the number, but because he knew what it meant. This wasn't wealth in the traditional sense. He couldn't buy a house, couldn't retire, but he had enough money and knowledge to design a life that didn't depend on pleasing a boss or surviving office politics. He had something rarer than wealth. He had control. A friend messaged him that night. "Dude, are you really leaving the country without a real job?" Jordan replied, "Depends how you define real." The final week before departure unfolded like the last few pages of a long chapter. Every task Jordan Reyes completed felt like closing a door he'd once feared would never open. He donated his last box of books to the community center on Boulevard. The mattress he slept on for 3 years went to a college student he met through Craigslist. His studio apartment echoed more with each passing day until the only sounds left were his thoughts and the persistent flutter of anticipation. By June 29th, Jordan's world fit inside a single backpack and a modest carry-on. No excess, no clutter, just the essentials. Laptop, 3 linen shirts, a few pairs of pants, a journal, toiletries, and the softest hoodie he owned. Minimalism, he realized, wasn't about deprivation. It was about space. Mental, emotional, physical. Space to think, space to breathe. And now, space to become someone new. The night before his flight, Jordan took a slow walk through his neighborhood for the last time. The corner bakery, the faded mural near the skate park, the tiny bookstore where he discovered your money or your life 2 years ago. Atlanta had raised him financially. This was the city where he learned the value of discipline, the quiet beauty of enough. He wasn't running from it. He was graduating from it. As he crossed the street to his building, his phone buzzed with a notification. Boarding pass ready. ATL OAX, June 30th. A one-way ticket. No return trip. No backup job, offer waiting. Just a $50,000 runway and a fierce kind of clarity that had taken years to earn. He exhaled slowly and smiled. This was real now. He barely slept. But it wasn't anxiety. It was eagerness. At 5:12 a.m., Jordan zipped his bag, turned off the lights, and walked out for the last time. His shoes echoed in the hallway. Outside, the city was still half asleep, streetlights blinking like eyes too tired to close. He grabbed a rideshare to the airport, head leaning gently against the window as Atlanta rolled by one last time. He didn't cry. He didn't panic. He just sat in a quiet, overwhelming peace. At the airport, he moved through security like a man untethered. No laptop bag for work. No business travel suit. No itinerary packed with meetings. Just the lightness of a new beginning. He waited at gate C-17, eyes scanning the faces around him. Tourists, retirees, digital nomads, students. Everyone going somewhere. But only a few, he guessed, were leaving with the kind of clarity he carried now. Not just about where they were going, but why. On the plane, Jordan took a window seat and watched the Georgia skyline fade into clouds. He didn't feel brave or reckless. He felt awake, more awake than he'd been in years. He pulled out his journal and began writing. This is the first day of the life I chose. Not the life I was told to want. Not the one built by job descriptions and policies and expectations. But the one I designed, day by day, dollar by dollar. This isn't a reset. It's a reveal. He closed the journal and stared out the window. Below him, the country stretched out in wide, quiet spaces, fields and rivers and towns with stories he'd never know. Ahead of him, a city he'd never visited, a language he only partially spoke, a cost of living that would buy him time, and a future no longer measured in performance reviews. He landed in Oaxaca around 2:10 p.m. The heat hugged him the moment he stepped off the plane. The kind of dry warmth that made every breath feel full and clean. His driver, Carlos, held up a small sign, Señor Reyes. They exchanged a few words in polite, practiced Spanish. Carlos offered him a bottle of water, tossed his bags in the back, and pulled away from the airport into the heart of Oaxaca City. The buildings were low and colorful, painted in hues that felt alive. Turquoise, sunflower yellow, coral red. There were no glass towers here. No endless rows of beige offices. Everything felt hand-built, human-sized. Jordan stared out the window as street musicians played on corners. Old women sold tortillas from stalls, and couples wandered slowly beneath hanging paper lanterns. It wasn't chaos. It was rhythm, a slower kind of life. The kind of life that had been calling him for years. His Airbnb was a modest second-floor apartment with a small terrace and an iron gate that opened with a soft click. Inside, terracotta tiles, white walls, and a tiny kitchen that looked onto a courtyard filled with lemon trees. Rent, $325 a month. Internet speed, surprisingly fast. Peace, instant. He didn't unpack right away. Instead, he stood barefoot on the terrace, sipping the cold hibiscus drink the host had left for him. Below, a group of kids played soccer in the street. Above, the sun tilted west, casting golden light across the rooftops. He could hear a rooster in the distance, a dog barking. Somewhere, faintly, music. Everything here was slower, and in that slowness, Jordan felt a deep exhale inside his chest, a breath he'd been holding for 5 years. That evening, he set up his laptop on the small wooden desk by the window, logged into his freelance platform, checked messages. One new client request. Looking for a writer to cover digital nomad life in Latin America. Paid weekly. Jordan smiled. He could write that in his sleep. Because now, this was his life. That night, he slept with the windows open. No AC hum. No streetlights burning outside. Just the gentle sound of Oaxaca drifting through the screen. Crickets, night wind, soft laughter from a nearby balcony. His bank account still had $47,000. But his wealth? It wasn't measured in dollars anymore. It was measured in time, choice, clarity, and it had just begun. The Monday after Jordan Reyes arrived in Oaxaca felt like the first day of his real life. No alarms, no meetings, no HR onboarding or Slack pings. Just sunlight through white curtains and the unfamiliar hum of a different country stirring awake. But as he lay in bed, watching shadows stretch across the ceiling, a strange tension hovered in his chest, one he hadn't expected. He was free. But who was he now? For the first time in 5 years, Jordan had no job title to hide behind, and the emptiness that came with that freedom demanded to be acknowledged. For years, his answer to the question, "So, what do you do?" was automatic. "I work in compliance for a logistics firm." It wasn't flashy, but it was clean, legible, respectable. Now, the same question echoed in his head, and the answer was more complicated. "I'm a writer. I freelance online. I'm exploring." None of it felt solid. None of it felt real. He realized that a big part of what he'd escaped, the rigid 9-to-5 system, had also given him a strange kind of armor. The kind that made conversations easy. The kind that offered belonging. Without it, he felt exposed. And that was the emotional price of freedom no one talks about. He got dressed in silence. Linen shirt, simple shorts, sandals, no watch. His only plan for the day was to find a co-working space and maybe pick up some groceries. But before stepping outside, he stood in front of the mirror. He looked ordinary. No corporate badge, no press pants. Just a young man with deep-set eyes, clear skin, and an inner world recalibrating itself in real time. Was he really ready for this? Could he build a life where the world didn't hand him structure, but he made it himself? There was only one way to find out. The streets were already alive. Vendors called out from carts stacked with fresh mangoes and tamales. Children darted past men selling woven rugs. The scent of cinnamon and corn wafted through the air. It was a sensory collision, nothing like Atlanta's polished, curated bustle. Here, chaos had rhythm. Life had texture. Jordan walked slowly, drinking it in. Every step pulled him farther from a version of himself who used to press elevator buttons in shiny glass buildings. He found the co-working space tucked behind a plant-filled courtyard. A small wooden sign read La Oficina Libra. Inside, it smelled of coffee and eucalyptus. There were only 7 desks. 3 were occupied, one by a French woman editing photos, another by a man on a call in German, and the last by a couple speaking rapid Spanish over open laptops. No one looked up when Jordan entered. He sat at a desk by the window, connected to Wi-Fi, and opened his laptop. For a moment, the familiar start screen glowed back at him, and he froze. No emails from a manager. No team dashboard. No Monday meeting notes. Just a blinking cursor in a blank document. He closed his eyes, took a breath, then typed to the top of the page. "What I know now." He started writing. Not for a client. Not for money. For himself. Words poured out about the cubicle years, the money rules, the freedom math. About waking up. About how strange it felt to be in a place where no one knew who he used to be. He didn't write to explain. He wrote to understand. 3 hours passed before he noticed the time. His fingers hurt. His back ached. But his heart felt clearer than it had in months. Later that day, Jordan explored the local mercado, buying fresh produce, handmade tortillas, and a wedge of Oaxacan cheese wrapped in wax paper. At home, he cooked simply, sautéed squash, rice, beans, and lime. No takeout app. No conference call in the background. Just music on low volume and the soft sizzle of onions. After dinner, he stepped out onto the terrace and journaled again. "Today I worked without pressure. Today I earned nothing, and yet I created something that felt real. I am learning to live in silence again. To let the noise go. I'm not my job title. I am what I build in the space that freedom gives me." He paused, underlining that last sentence, because that's what this was really about. He knew now, freedom wasn't the end. It was the beginning of identity, rebuilt from choice. He'd been raised in a world that defined people by what they did, what they earned, how busy they were. But in this quiet moment, Jordan saw something else. The deepest part of identity isn't what you do to survive. It's what you choose when survival is no longer the only goal. And that realization was liberating. That night, as he drifted to sleep, Jordan whispered a new mantra into the silence. "I'm not lost. I am choosing." And that was enough. The first full month in Oaxaca passed in a rhythm so different from Jordan Reyes' old life that at times it felt like he'd stepped into someone else's shoes. But there was no confusion about who was living it. Every sunrise confirmed it. This life, this radically simpler, slower, and quieter life, belonged to him. And the most surprising part, he didn't feel deprived. He felt alive. Back in Atlanta, life moved fast and cost more. Mornings were coffee to go, Uber rides in traffic, $17 lunches eaten at his desk while replying to emails. His rent, car insurance, gym membership, and work wardrobe used to swallow over 70% of his income before he even had a chance to live. Here, he could go entire days without spending more than $8. Fresh tortillas, 30 cents. A street taco, 75 cents. Espresso from the cafe down the street, $1.10. Co-working space, $50 for the month. His minimalist apartment came furnished. No utilities over $20. Internet never glitched. Groceries were bought from people who grew them, not megacorporations. And something strange happened in the quiet of that frugal living. Jordan stopped craving more. He started craving presence. He walked almost everywhere, slower than he used to. No podcasts in his ears. No checking messages while crossing the street. He greeted the man at the bodega by name, learned the baker's schedule, began recognizing regulars at the cafe who smiled when they saw him pull out his notebook. The world felt smaller here, not in a limiting way, in a human one. People lived with less, but their eyes sparkled more. He realized the wealth of this place had nothing to do with income. It was found in time, in conversation, in a mango offered by a stranger just because. Jordan tracked his expenses obsessively that first month, not from fear, but fascination. July total expenses, $728.35. And it wasn't a struggle. It wasn't sacrifice. It was discovery. He'd stripped life down to essentials and found that joy didn't disappear. In fact, it became easier to notice. A sunrise no longer rushed through while he commuted. Now he watched it, with tea, in silence. A home-cooked meal wasn't a necessity. It was a ritual. Laundry day became a chance to chat with neighbors and swap travel tips. Even boredom felt different, softer, a sign of breathing space, not failure. Living on less revealed something capitalism always tries to bury. That enough is a moving target, and that freedom begins the moment you stop moving the target out of reach. Jordan didn't need more income. He needed less noise. And in the absence of endless consumption, creativity surged. He woke early to write most mornings. Sometimes freelance assignments. Sometimes personal essays. Sometimes just reflections. His writing had changed too. It was less filtered, less polished, but more honest. One essay titled, "Why Slowness Feels Like Wealth," got picked up by a digital publication. They paid him $200 and asked if he had more pieces. He did, because in this stillness, stories grew like vines. Unexpectedly, gracefully. But this wasn't about money. It was about alignment. The lower his expenses dropped, the higher his integrity rose. He no longer had to take clients who drained him. No longer had to network with people he didn't respect just to get promoted. No longer had to lie to himself about what made him happy. He was spending less, but living more. There were challenges, of course. He missed his mom, who still didn't quite understand why he left a perfectly good job. He struggled sometimes with the language barrier, fumbling through markets and taxi rides. And there were lonely days, days where no messages came in, where the weight of solitude hung heavy. But even those days felt different here, because they were chosen. They were not punishments from burnout or isolation by overwork. They were part of the fabric of real life. Slower life. A life with room for quiet and discomfort. Midway through August, Jordan stood in front of a mirror. Same linen shirt, same sandals. But his face had changed. Less tension in the jaw. Softer eyes. Deeper breath. He wasn't grinding anymore. He was growing. And there was no turning back. He sent a voice message to his old work friend Jada that night. "Hey, just want to check in. I'm doing well. Living on less than I thought I could. And I don't miss anything. Honestly, I didn't know how much of my spending was just numbing. I feel good. Clear. You could totally do this, by the way. Not Mexico necessarily. But whatever your version of slowing down looks like. It's possible." She replied a few hours later. "I needed that today. Thanks. Maybe one day I'll be brave enough to jump too." Jordan smiled. Bravery wasn't a leap. It was a series of tiny choices. And he was finally living in the light of those choices. He wrote in his journal that night, "We're taught that value comes from what we can afford. But here, with $8 days and $1 coffee, I found more clarity than I ever did in $800 paychecks." Simplicity isn't less. It's more of what matters. Jordan fell asleep with the window open, stars spilling over adobe rooftops. His net worth hadn't changed much since he arrived. But his life had. Because for the first time, he wasn't chasing wealth. He was experiencing it. In every quiet moment. In every unspent dollar. In every breath, not owned by a clock-in system. He was living proof that freedom isn't bought. It's built. And often, it begins with less. The true test of freedom, Jordan Reyes would come to realize, wasn't how well you performed in front of others. It was how you lived when no one else was looking. When there were no meetings to prepare for, no clients to impress, no likes or views or check-ins. Just you, your time, your choices. In the quiet months after leaving his 9-to-5, Jordan came face to face with a version of himself he had long neglected. The self he'd buried under schedules. The self he ignored during rush hour. The self he'd numbed with 2-day shipping and 3-screen multitasking. Now, there are no more excuses. No more hiding. It started with how he spent his mornings. He'd always been a night owl, wired from years of late email replies and glowing laptop screens. But in Oaxaca, the morning air was too still, too beautiful to sleep through. So he started rising with the sun, not because he had to, but because he could. And in that decision was everything. He brewed his own coffee, slowly, ground the beans by hand, watched the steam rise from the ceramic mug as the city stirred. He read, not headlines or Slack messages, but fiction, philosophy, travel memoirs. Then he wrote, every day, before the world rushed in. Sometimes essays, sometimes nothing but thoughts, but always in his voice. He wasn't writing for money, or algorithms, or even for readers. He was writing to remember who he was. Some days he didn't open his laptop at all. He hiked up to the Cerro del Fortin and sat for hours overlooking the city. He wandered into museums, eyes lingering on brushstrokes and textiles. He took Spanish classes at the community center, often fumbling, but laughing harder than he had in years. And yet, he never once felt lazy. Because for the first time, he understood, rest is not the opposite of productivity. It's the foundation of presence. Jordan began practicing what he called invisible integrity, a kind of self-discipline that didn't need an audience. He made his bed every morning because it made him feel calm. He tracked every peso he spent because clarity brought peace. He cleaned his kitchen nightly because order gave him freedom. He wasn't building habits to look impressive. He was building a life that felt whole. And that life happened in the unseen moments. One Thursday afternoon, a light rain tapped on his windows as Jordan sat at his desk. No client deadlines. No meetings. Just a feeling he hadn't known in years. Contentment. Not the high of a raise or the thrill of buying something new, but a quiet, grounding kind of joy. He picked up his journal. I used to believe identity was something we showed. Now I believe it's what we do when no one's watching. These slow mornings, these clean dishes, these unposted sunsets, they are shaping me in ways applause never could. He closed the notebook and leaned back, rain still falling. He wasn't chasing recognition anymore. He was building character. And that's what financial freedom had become to him. Not a victory lap, not early retirement, but a slow return to authenticity. Because without the noise, without the pressure, without the constant need to be seen, what remained was the truth. Who are you when the world isn't measuring you? Who are you when there's no one to impress? Who are you when you finally get to decide? That month, he got an email from a former colleague. Hey man, saw you left the company. Brave move. You always seemed like the steady type. What are you even doing out there? Jordan stared at the message. He could have responded with numbers. How he cut expenses, made freelance income, how much money he still had saved. He could have shared a photo of his terrace, the sunrise, the mango tree out back. But instead, he typed one sentence. I'm remembering how to be a person. Then he hit send. There was something sacred in the simplicity now. Grocery shopping barefoot. Stretching in the morning light. Walking home with tamales wrapped in banana leaves. No one praised him for these things. But he didn't need them to. He'd found something more enduring than praise. He'd found peace. He spent less than $750 again that month. But the real return on investment, he felt present in his own life. Not chasing. Not performing. Just being. One morning, a neighborhood dog began sleeping on his porch. Scruffy, sweet, always waiting with a tail wag when Jordan came out. He named her Luz. She didn't belong to anyone in particular. But somehow, she belonged to him now. They walked together, sat together, watched sunsets from the same spot on the terrace. And Jordan realized, not for the first time, the things that matter most can't be purchased. Connection, rhythm, purpose, clarity. They're not commodities. They're cultivated. That night, he journaled again. Freedom isn't the absence of structure. It's the opportunity to create your own. I no longer need to be busy to feel worthy. I no longer need to be seen to know I matter. This life, quiet, small, unseen, is mine. And it is enough. He slept with the windows open. Luz curled at the foot of the bed. The city quiet and breathing with him. And in the silence, Jordan understood something he hadn't before. Freedom isn't loud. It's quiet enough for you to hear yourself again. The first time Jordan Reyes built a budget that felt like art instead of restriction, he was sitting barefoot on the kitchen floor. A notebook in his lap, a pencil behind his ear, Luz sleeping on the cool towel beside him. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't color-coded. It wasn't built with formulas or rules from financial blogs. It was built from rhythm, the rhythm of a life designed, not just to work, but to feel whole. Back in Atlanta, budgeting had always felt like a war between guilt and shame. He would stare at his bank statement, highlighter in hand, ready to punish himself into discipline. $27 on food delivery, $61 on ride shares, $94 on new shoes he didn't need. Then rent, car insurance, subscriptions, credit card interest. By the time he was done categorizing it all, his anxiety was through the roof. Not because he spent too much, but because he didn't feel in control. His money had always been a reaction, never a design. But here, in this small, white-walled kitchen in Oaxaca, Jordan was learning to treat money like watercolor. Not a system of pressure, a practice of intention. He started by listing the essentials. Rent, $325. Groceries, $180. Co-working space, $50. Utilities and internet, $45. Transport, mostly walking, occasional collectivo, $20. Miscellaneous, laundry, mobile data, dog food for Luz, $40. Total, $660 per month. That left room for the soft things. Things that made life feel alive. Coffee dates with himself, $15. Spanish classes, $30. Museum entry or local cinema, $10. Giving back, a tip, a gift, a donation, $20. Total, $735. He rounded it up to $750, a number that felt generous, but still lean. Human. And then, at the top of the page, he wrote, "This is the cost of a life that feels like mine." He began to see every dollar as a brushstroke, every choice a form of expression. A $1 coffee drunk slowly on a terrace became more valuable than a $9 one in a to-go cup during a conference call. A walk to the market in the sun felt richer than any Uber across town. Even buying eggs from the older woman at the corner stand became part of the art, because it wasn't just about spending less. It was about feeling more with every peso. Jordan created a ritual. At the end of each week, he'd sit on the terrace with his notebook and record the week's spending. Not as a punishment, not with dread, but with curiosity. He wrote down not just what he spent, but how it felt. Paid 15 pesos for 2 tamales. Delicious, filling, felt grateful. Skipped paying for co-working on Thursday. Worked at home instead. Felt a little restless. Spent $4 on pastries I didn't need. Ate them all in one sitting. Felt a bit numb. Bought handmade soap at the market. Smelled it every time I walked past the sink. Smiled each time. It became a form of journaling. A way to track emotions along with transactions. And over time, he noticed patterns. Not just of overspending, but of undervaluing joy. One week, he realized he hadn't spent a single peso on fun. No coffee dates. No museum. No pastries. Just bare-bones living. He felt drained, even though his wallet was full. That week, he wrote, "Sometimes, not spending is its own kind of poverty. Deprivation in the name of discipline is still deprivation. The goal isn't to hoard. It's to flow." And when it came to income, Jordan kept it simple. He committed to earning just enough to cover his budget and a small buffer, roughly $1,000 per month. He wrote for a few online magazines, did freelance content strategy for ethical businesses, Ghost wrote blog posts about remote work. The work was quiet, honest, flexible. Some weeks he earned more, some weeks less. But he always covered his needs and left space for life. He no longer saw budgeting as something for broke people. He saw it as a creative philosophy, an intentional shaping of time, energy, and desire. He gave every dollar a job, but not in a militaristic way. He let his money reflect his values. If something no longer aligned with his joy or peace, he removed it. No guilt, just adjustment. He ditched the digital budget tracker and stuck with a notebook. Why? Because writing things by hand slowed him down, forced him to feel his decisions. And that was what he was really after. Not control, connection. One day, he taught a local friend, Anna, his version of budgeting. She was a painter who made money selling earrings in the plaza. She hated money talk, said it made her feel stupid. Jordan smiled and said, "Me too, until I realized money is just energy, and I get to decide where it flows." He showed her his journal, the little line items, the emotional notes, the doodles and flourishes and scratch-outs. Her eyes lit up. "This feels beautiful," she said. "It's supposed to," Jordan replied. That night, he wrote, "We've been taught budgeting is about denial. But what if it's about design? Not asking, what can I afford? But asking, what do I want this life to feel like? This is not about being frugal. It's about being free." In that moment, Jordan understood something deeper than any financial rule. Budgeting wasn't a skill. It was a language, and he was finally fluent. It began like any other Tuesday. The air was warm, still. The scent of roasted coffee drifted through the courtyard. Lou's paced in lazy circles near Jordan's feet as he spooned out a little food into her bowl. He didn't know, not yet, that today would reroute something inside him. He only knew it was market day, and he had 200 pesos in his pocket, roughly $10. Enough, he figured, for vegetables, fruit, and maybe a pastry if he timed it right. But what he walked away with that afternoon had nothing to do with groceries. The market was already alive when he arrived. Vendors shouting over one another, voices braided with music, laughter, and the rustle of woven bags. Children chasing each other barefoot between stalls. This place never bored him. Every visit was a story waiting to unfold. He picked ripe tomatoes, a papaya nearly the size of his forearm, limes, cilantro, and sweet corn. With half his budget still in hand, he turned down a quieter aisle lined with handmade crafts. A woman in her 60s sat behind a table, her hands quietly working on a row of colorful fabric dolls. Her silver-streaked braid hung low over one shoulder. Jordan slowed his steps. She looked up and smiled, soft, kind, patient. "Quieres ver?" she asked. He nodded. He didn't need a doll. He wasn't shopping for souvenirs. But something about her felt magnetic. Solid. Grounded. He picked one up. Hand-stitched. Careful lines. Tiny flowers sewn into the hem of its dress. "How long do these take?" he asked, switching to slow Spanish. She held up 2 fingers. "Dos días. Para uno." 2 full days. For one doll. "Cuánto cuesta?" Jordan asked. "120 pesos," she replied. "About $6. He paused. He only had 100 pesos left. That would leave little for dinner. He could easily walk away, thank her politely, and move on. But he didn't. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out the bills, and handed them over. "Para mi casa," he said with a small smile. As she wrapped the doll in brown paper, she said something that caught him off guard. "No todos miran con el corazón," she said. "Not everyone looks with the heart." He thanked her, tucked the bundle under his arm, and kept walking. But her words followed him. Later, in the kitchen, he unpacked the groceries and placed the doll gently on the small shelf above his sink. The house felt different with it there. Not fuller, just warmer. He boiled corn, sliced papaya, poured a glass of cool water, and sat down at his little table. $10 had bought him enough food for 3 days. And a tiny piece of someone's soul, stitched into cotton and thread. That evening, he wrote in his journal, "I used to believe value was in volume, what you get for what you pay. But today I learned that value is sometimes about the weight of the moment." That doll took 2 days to make. She sold it for $6. I'll remember her for years. The next morning, he added something new to his weekly budget. Not a category, a question. What am I spending that makes someone else feel seen? He realized that in the hyper-optimized world of personal finance, that kind of thinking rarely existed. Most budgets focus on saving from the world. This was about investing in it. Jordan went back to that stall 2 weeks later. Not to buy something, just to say thank you. The woman remembered him. They chatted for 10 minutes in slow Spanish, her correcting his verbs, him laughing at himself. When he walked away, she handed him a tiny doll stitched in blue. No cuesta nada, she said. Es para ti. It costs nothing. It's for you. He felt the lump in his throat before he even left the market. Not because of the gift, because of what it symbolized. Connection, reciprocity, presence. And all of it had begun with a simple decision. To spend money with his heart, not just his head. That week, Jordan wrote an essay for a digital publication titled The $10 Day That Changed How I Budget. In it, he talked about dignity, about seeing people, about how sometimes our smallest transactions hold the most meaning. The essay was shared thousands of times. People wrote in saying they bought coffee differently that week, tipped more, asked someone's name. One woman in Vermont wrote, "I never thought a story about a doll could make me cry, but I just sent $50 to my favorite street artist. Thank you." Jordan didn't make money from that piece, but he didn't need to. He had something better, impact, and in that impact, purpose. He no longer budgeted to just survive. He budgeted to connect, to himself, to others, to the life he was building. Some days, the $10 was spent on a book from a secondhand stall. Other days, on mangoes from the same vendor, who now called him Hermano. Sometimes it went to a street musician whose voice broke the stillness just right. And always, it went with intention. In the world Jordan came from, $10 was a rounding error, a forgotten charge, a drink at happy hour, a delivery fee. Here, it was a tool of awareness, of reverence, of gratitude. That night, as he journaled with Lou's curled against his leg, he wrote, "I used to believe budgeting was about limitation, but now I see it as devotion. Devotion to the life I want, to the people I meet, and to the moments that ask me, will you choose presence over performance?" The doll stayed above his sink, quiet and still. A reminder that with every peso, he was building not just a budget, but a life of meaning. One small decision at a time. It started with a ringtone Jordan hadn't heard in months. The one tied his old phone number. The one he kept active, just in case. A low vibration on the kitchen table. The screen lit up. Blocked number. He almost didn't answer, but something told him to pick up. "Hello." There was a pause. Then a voice he hadn't heard in a year. "Jordan?" "Man, it's Luis." Luis had been his closest friend at the agency. Late nights, Thai takeout at the office, half-joking dreams of quitting. They'd bonded over shared frustrations, micromanaging clients, toxic performance reviews, the performative busyness. When Jordan left, Luis stayed. He said he needed a few more months. That was 15 months ago. Now, his voice sounded older. "Sorry to just call like this," he said, "but I had to hear it from you. Is it true? You really left the country? You're not working for anyone anymore?" Jordan chuckled. "Yeah, it's true." Silence. Then, damn. They talked for an hour. Luis confessed things Jordan already knew, but hearing them laid bare was different. He was exhausted. Hadn't taken a real day off in 6 months. His anxiety was getting worse. He wasn't sleeping. He hated who he was becoming. "I make $96,000 a year," Luis said, "and I feel broke. Like, spiritually broke. Like I'm spending all my energy just staying afloat." Jordan leaned back in his chair. "I know," he said quietly. "I used to live there too." Luis asked questions in rapid fire. "How do you earn money now? What about healthcare? Do you ever get bored? How much do you spend? Don't you miss like ambition?" Jordan answered patiently. "I freelance a little. Mostly writing. $1,000 a month covers everything. Healthcare's different out here. Slower. Cheaper. Bored? No. I'm just not numb anymore. And ambition, yeah. I still have it. It's just not about status now. It's about alignment." They paused. Then Louise said what so many others had said before. "I wish I could do what you did." Jordan hesitated, then said something he had only recently come to believe. "You can." He knew Luis wouldn't pack his bags tomorrow. That's not how transformation works. But he also knew something had been planted. A seed of possibility. A crack in the narrative. The voice inside Luis whispering, "Maybe there's another way," it has gotten louder. After they hung up, Jordan felt something he hadn't in months. Grief. Not for the life he left, but for the people still in it. He sat with that. Didn't run from it. Let breathe. Then, slowly, he picked up his journal. Sometimes it feels like I'm living in an alternate timeline, a reality where the rules don't apply. And every time I speak to someone from the old life, I remember. I didn't just leave a job. I left a story, and not everyone knows they can walk out of it. The next day, another call. This time, Jada, his old project manager. The one who used to whisper, "I hate this place," between meetings. She'd seen his essay go viral. The one about the $10 doll. "You made me cry," she said. Then, "I'm quitting in December." Jordan smiled. "What changed?" "I realized I've been managing projects but ignoring my life. Your story made me ask better questions." He didn't feel proud. Didn't feel superior. He felt useful. Like maybe his life was a kind of permission. Not a blueprint. Not a flex. But a small light. Proof that choosing differently doesn't lead to ruin. He began getting messages. DMs. Emails. Comments. From strangers and old friends alike. People asking, "How do I start? How do I know I'm not ruining everything? How do you trust that less really is more?" So he wrote back. To everyone. And what he said wasn't revolutionary. He didn't pitch a course or offer coaching. He simply told the truth. Start by asking what your energy is worth. Then ask if your current life honors that worth. If it doesn't, begin again. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Not to escape, but to return. The calls kept coming. Not all literal. Some came as invitations, as job offers, as temptation. "Come back, Jordan. You're too talented to be out there writing blogs. You could triple your income in 6 months." He turned them down, not with disdain, but with clarity. Because every time the past knocked, he remembered something. He had already been the person they wanted him to be, had already played the part, and he had chosen something better. Not easier, better. One evening, while walking loose through the plaza, his phone buzzed again. This time it was from his cousin in New York. "You still out there playing monk in Mexico?" The message read. Jordan laughed. He typed back. "Still out here being free." The world would keep calling him back. Because it didn't understand a man who chose simplicity over spectacle. It didn't know how to market peace. Didn't know how to brand joy. But Jordan wasn't asking to be understood. He was just asking to be true. And he was. It came on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday that doesn't warn you. The air in Oaxaca was thick and unrelenting. Rain hadn't come in 3 weeks. The plants on Jordan's balcony drooped, dry and weary, like him. Luz had thrown up twice that morning. His laptop charger had shorted out. 2 clients hadn't paid their invoices on time, and one had ghosted entirely. By noon, he'd received an email from the IRS. Something about a form he forgot to file the year before he left. He hadn't showered. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't opened the windows. It was one of those days. He sat cross-legged on the floor of his apartment, back pressed against the wall, phone in hand, looking at his bank balance. $19,248.73. Still plenty. But today, it didn't feel like enough. For the first time in months, Jordan typed "remote marketing jobs Atlanta" into the search bar. The results came quickly. $80,000 base salaries. 401k matches. Fully remote. Healthcare. Structure. Security. Words that used to make his skin crawl suddenly felt like cool water. He clicked through one, then another. A familiar ache welled in his chest. Maybe I was stupid, he thought. Maybe this whole thing was a fantasy. A 2-year sabbatical. I can't afford to stretch any further. He heard Luz shift beside him, her eyes heavy, her breathing soft. Even she seemed tired of the day. That afternoon, he didn't write. He didn't walk. He didn't budget. He lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling for over an hour. And for the first time in his new life, he whispered something he hadn't dared to say out loud. Did I make a mistake? Even freedom, it turns out, has its cost. It demands that you keep believing in it, even on the days when nothing's working. In that day, Jordan couldn't muster the belief. Not alone. So he called Anna, the local artist he'd become close with, the one who taught him that budgets could be beautiful, the one who always had paint under her fingernails and light in her voice. He didn't even explain everything. Just said, "Can we talk?" She didn't ask questions. Just said, "Yes. Come." He walked the 10 minutes to her studio in silence. Inside, she had her usual playlist humming, old guitar ballads from the 70s. She handed him a cold glass of tamarind juice and pointed to a stool. He sat. Then he told her, Not everything, but enough. The money, the clients, the doubt, the job listings, the IRS. She didn't interrupt, didn't jump in with advice. She listened like people used to listen, with both ears and no ego. When he finished, she leaned forward. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. He nodded. "I have $6 in my bank account," she said, smiling gently. Jordan blinked. "I sold 3 earrings last week. That's it. Rent is in 5 days. I'm scared. I'm so scared. But you know what? What? I would rather be scared and alive than comfortable and numb." That hit him like a bell. Not because it was new, but because he had forgotten. Forgotten what he'd come here to remember. He wasn't here to be safe. He was here to be whole. Anna stood and walked over to a shelf. Picked up a canvas. It was small, unfinished, but vivid. Brushstrokes of green and blue and burnt orange. "This one," she said. "I started it the week after you taught me how to track my spending. Every night, I painted instead of doom scrolling. I made it with leftover paints. Leftover time. Leftover hope." She turned it around and smiled. "Do you see now?" Jordan swallowed the lump in his throat. He saw. He remembered. He returned. That night, he didn't check job boards. He didn't email old contacts. He sat with Luz, opened his notebook, and wrote, "Today I almost gave it all up. Not because it wasn't working, but because I forgot why it matters. This life is not about certainty. It's about conviction. And conviction needs community. I almost gave up until someone reminded me what I already knew. That doubt is part of the work. That loneliness is part of the way. That even freedom gets heavy sometimes. But still, I would rather carry this weight than wear chains again." He put down his pen, opened the windows, let the still air in, and for the first time all day, he could breathe again. Later, he messaged Anna. "Thank you for reminding me." She replied, "You reminded me first." Ambition didn't die when Jordan left his corporate job. It just changed its shape. Back in Atlanta, ambition had looked like 12-hour days in glass-walled offices, metrics meetings that blurred into evenings, crushing it, bonuses, promotions, a resume that grew fatter by the month, but a soul that thinned out in silence. There, ambition had been an armor, a performance, a reason to keep going when the body whispered stop. But now ambition felt different. It breathed slower. It asked different questions. Not, "How do I win?" but, "How do I serve?" Not, "How do I climb?" but, "How do I root?" It started subtly. At first, Jordan thought he was losing his edge. He stopped checking LinkedIn, stopped tracking the growth of his freelance income every month, stopped caring about optimization. Instead, he cared about resonance. Did the work matter? Did it feel like him? Did it create something bigger than a paycheck? He didn't want to work less. He wanted to work with meaning. He'd spent 2 years creating a new rhythm. Mornings for writing, afternoons for people, evenings for rest. A structure not built by productivity gurus, but by presence. Still, he missed building something. Something that didn't just pay rent, but pushed boundaries. Something that invited others in. One afternoon, he opened a blank document. Title, Freedom by Design. He wasn't sure what it would be yet. A book, a blog series, a resource library. All he knew was this. People kept asking how he'd done it, how he'd left, how he'd stayed gone, how he made peace with less, how he made more with it. Maybe, he thought, there's a way to share the blueprint. Not as gospel, but as possibility. He started small. 1 blog post a week. Lessons from life outside the algorithm. One was called, "You Don't Need More Discipline. You Need Less Noise." Another, "Budgeting as Devotion, Not Denial." He paired them with photos of Luz, his neighborhood, his kitchen table. Nothing glossy, just real. He launched a newsletter with no promise, no pitch, just a space. And it grew. 100 subscribers, then 500, then 2,000. People wrote in from all over. A single mom in Denver who started meal prepping with joy. A retired teacher in Dublin who began decluttering her expenses. A burned-out lawyer in LA who decided to finally take a 3-month sabbatical. Each one confirming what Jordan had begun to suspect. Freedom isn't rare. It's just buried beneath debt and status and fear and stories we didn't choose. His job wasn't to teach freedom. It was to unearth it. For the first time, he started calling himself something he'd once feared. A teacher, not a coach, not a guru, just someone who had gone ahead and turned around to leave breadcrumbs. He created a free workbook, designing a life you don't have to escape. No upsell, no funnel, just a gift. And when he shared it, he got a message from someone in Manila. I thought financial freedom was only for rich people, but now I see it's about choice. And I've started choosing again. Jordan wept when he read that. He printed it, pinned it above his desk. It reminded him of why he'd walked away and why he stayed away. Ambition, it turns out, was not dead. It was reborn, not in corner offices, but in corner cafes, back kitchens, late-night voice memos, budget journals, dog walks, long naps. Ambition had become about depth, not scale, about offering, not extracting. He wrote one sentence in his notebook that night. My ambition now is to be fully myself, in public, so that others remember they can be too. Sometimes, people asked if he missed the old goals. The six-figure income, the prestige, the speed. He told them the truth. No, because none of that ever made me feel like this. Then he would wave a hand around his small home. The half-melted candle, the open windows, the sound of children playing outside, the smell of fresh lime from the kitchen. And he would say, softly, "This is what success feels like to me now." Still, the old world didn't let go easily. A VC-funded startup offered him $120,000 to come back as head of content. Remote, full autonomy, flexible hours. On paper, perfect. He read the email, then closed his laptop, and laughed. Not because he wasn't tempted, but because he was. And that temptation reminded him how far he'd come. He'd gone from craving safety to becoming his own shelter, from chasing applause to becoming his own audience, from needing proof to being the proof. That was ambition now. Not speed, not status, just stillness, and sharing, and staying. It didn't announce itself. There was no triumphant music, no inbox ping, no confetti, no follower milestone, no viral post. It just arrived. One morning, while Jordan brewed his coffee, the light hit his living room floor just right. Lou stretched, tail wagging sleepily, and padded toward the open door. The street was humming outside, vendors setting up, shoes scuffing cobblestone, a guitar warming up somewhere down the block. And something inside Jordan, something quiet but real, whispered, "This is it. Not a finish line, not a climax. Just this. A life that was no longer fighting to be felt, but simply was." He sat down, notebook in hand, and let the moment write itself. No alarms today, no deadlines chasing me, just a body at peace, a soul in alignment, a life that fits. Jordan didn't mean to design his days this way, but little by little, they had shaped themselves. He woke with the sun now, not to squeeze productivity out of the morning, but because the world was too beautiful at 6:47 a.m. to miss. He walked loose before the streets got too loud. He read for 30 minutes before touching his phone. He spent an hour with a pen, not a keyboard. He cooked, slowly, intentionally, with music playing low in the background, always Nina Simone or something that reminded him to breathe deeper. He answered emails with kindness, even the ones he'd normally ignore. He said no often, and yes, only when it tasted like truth. There was a time when Jordan believed he had to hustle to be worthy. That rest was indulgence. That slowness was laziness. That joy was for weekends and the retired. Now, he understood what nobody told him back then. Slowness is not a step backward. It's a return to what matters, to what lasts. His bank balance wasn't growing fast, but neither was his stress. His income wasn't scalable, but his peace was. And that trade? He'd make it again and again. On his walks, neighbors greeted him by name. The cafe owner near the plaza saved his seat by the window. The woman who sold mangoes tucked extras into his bag. He wasn't visiting this place anymore. He belonged to it, and it to him. One night, Anna invited him to a rooftop dinner with a few locals. There was no agenda, just grilled vegetables, laughter, cheap wine, and music. At some point, someone passed Jordan a small guitar. He declined at first, then played softly, the one song he remembered from college. Something imperfect, something real. Everyone clapped when he finished, not because it was great, but because he shared. And in that moment, Jordan realized something. He was no longer hiding. He wasn't perfect. Some days, he still doubted, still wondered if he'd made the right choices. But now, when the fear came, it didn't stay. Because he had built a life that didn't just look good. It felt good. He called his mother the next morning. They talked for an hour. She didn't ask about money. She just said, "You sound like yourself again." And that meant more than any number ever could. Later that week, he opened his email to find something unexpected. A reader had sent him a photo. It was a small garden, carved into the corner of an apartment balcony in Toronto. A caption read, "I read your post about designing a life with peace at the center. I started with this. My first tomatoes." Jordan stared at the image for a long time. Not because it was grand, but because it was proof that what he was doing mattered, even if it moved quietly. Success didn't shout anymore. It whispered, through small gestures, through paid invoices, through clean dishes, through dogs fed and floors swept and bodies rested, through inboxes that weren't emergencies, through phone calls that weren't apologies, through laughter that came easier than before. Jordan began calling it the hum, the quiet sound of a life that fits. The opposite of burnout's buzz. Not loud, not viral, but stable, sacred, steady. He wrote a piece that week called "The Sound of a Life That's Quietly Working." In it, he said, "It doesn't always look like winning. It doesn't always look like wealth. But when your days no longer hurt to live, you made it. That's the new success. A life that doesn't chase applause, just works." He ended the piece with a question. "What does your life sound like?" Thousands responded, not with noise, but with echoes, of quiet walks, of handwritten lists, of canceled meetings, of slow meals, of new beginnings. The hum wasn't his alone. It was rising everywhere, in pockets, in corners, in people brave enough to trade volume for meaning. And in that truth, Jordan felt no need to go back. Because he hadn't escaped. He had arrived. It had been nearly 3 years since Jordan walked out of that office for the last time. Since he powered down his company-issued laptop, slid his badge into the Dropbox, and took one last glance at the fluorescent hallway he'd paced for half a decade. He hadn't looked back much, but every once in a while, when the light hit just right or a memory wandered in uninvited, he'd think about her. Cynthia, his old boss. Cynthia wasn't cruel, but she was sharp, precise, calculated in a way that made people nervous before 9 a.m. She valued deliverables more than humans. She once told Jordan, "I don't pay you to feel things. I pay you to execute." It stuck with him, not as an insult, but as a lesson, a warning, even, about what happens when people forget they're people. For months after he left, Jordan drafted a letter in his head, sometimes in anger, sometimes in longing, sometimes just to give form to all the feelings that had nowhere to go. He never sent it, but one evening, after a long walk and a soft dinner, he wrote it down for himself. Not for revenge, not for closure, but because there was something inside it he needed to say out loud. "Dear Cynthia, it's been almost 3 years since I left. I wonder if you even noticed. Back then, I thought you were the problem. The endless meetings, the cold directives, the disregard for rest. But I know better now. You were in the system. You were just trying to survive it. And maybe that's the saddest part. I kept thinking if I just worked harder, showed up earlier, learned to speak the language of hustle, you'd see me. You'd value me. But that was never your job. That was mine. And I failed. I failed to protect my peace. I failed to set boundaries. I failed to say, no, this isn't working. But I've learned. I've learned that a life should fit the person living it, not squeeze them into silence. I've learned that ambition isn't about climbing. It's about choosing where to root. And I've learned that no job, no matter how shiny, is worth my sleep, my self-respect, or my Saturdays. I'm not writing to accuse you. I'm writing to forgive you. Because you were trapped, too. You may still be. And if no one's told you lately, you're allowed to leave. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to live a life that doesn't require armor. I hope you find that life. I did. And it's quieter, softer, but truer than anything that ever fit in a KPI. Jordan. He read it once, twice, folded it into his journal, closed the cover. It wasn't for her. It was for the version of himself who still thought he needed to earn worthiness through exhaustion. The one who used to shrink in her presence. Who thought burnout meant he was finally working hard enough. That version had died. This was the eulogy. The next morning, he felt lighter. Not because the letter changed anything, but because it honored everything. His choice, his pain, his awakening, his return. It was proof that healing doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes, it comes with a pen, a quiet room, and permission to stop pretending. He wondered if Cynthia had ever written a letter like that, or if she still lived behind spreadsheets and softened smiles. If she'd ever paused long enough to ask, "Why am I doing this?" If she ever thought about him, if she resented his leaving, or envied it, or both. Weeks later, he saw her name in a headline on LinkedIn. Former VP of Growth joins AI startup as Chief Strategy Officer. Same city, new title. The comments below were filled with admiration. Congrats. Well deserved. Killing it, as always. Jordan didn't feel anything. Not bitterness. Not pride. Just distance. Like watching an old movie he used a quote by heart, but no longer remembered the lines. He clicked away and kept writing. That afternoon, he shared a new blog post. It was titled, "Letters We Write to the Systems That Shaped Us." In it, he offered no advice, no steps, just a question. What would you say to the person who taught you to betray yourself? And what would you say to the version of you who believed it was necessary? The post got more replies than anything he'd ever written. People didn't just comment. They wrote back. Paragraphs, pages, stories of managers, mothers, mentors, exes, churches, classrooms, corporations, so many systems, so many names, so many quiet goodbyes that had never been voiced. That night, Jordan lit a candle, not for ceremony, but because it felt right. He sat by the window, notebook in lap, and whispered, "We don't need vengeance. We need release. This is how we reclaim ourselves." He never sent the letter, but in writing it, he realized he didn't need anyone's permission to be free. Not anymore. There was a time when Jordan could tell you exactly how much money he wanted to make. $120,000 a year. Not too outrageous. Not too modest. Enough to afford a two-bedroom in Midtown. Enough to max out his Roth IRA. Enough for vacations and new tech every year. Enough to feel safe. He'd spent years chasing that number. But something happened the day he hit $50,000 in his savings. He stopped chasing. It didn't happen immediately. At first, he expected to feel more secure, more untouchable, more grown-up. But after a week of staring at the nice round figure in his bank account, he felt something unexpected. Nothing. No rush of power. No dopamine surge. No finish line euphoria. Just stillness. And then the whisper. Now what? That question stuck with him longer than any dollar ever had, because it unhooked him from the idea that money was the point. He'd been trained, like so many of us, to believe that wealth meant worth. That rich people were smart, disciplined, superior. That poverty was a result of laziness, bad choices, low value. But in Oaxaca, those myths cracked. He met a woman who lived in a one-room flat and made handmade tortillas from 5 a.m. to noon. She didn't earn more than $300 a month, but she smiled deeper than anyone he knew in the States. She knew the names of every child on her block. She danced when she cooked. She prayed over her masa. She slept well. Jordan once asked her what she wanted in life. She laughed and said, "I already have it." That shook him, not because she lacked ambition, but because she lacked scarcity. Her life was full, even if her wallet wasn't. Jordan realized he'd been taught the opposite. That life was something you purchased, not something you lived. So he started asking new questions. Not, "How do I get rich?" but, "What is enough for me? What does wealth feel like in my body? What kind of life do I want my money to make possible?" He made a list one day, not of financial goals, but freedom goals. Waking up without an alarm, saying no without fear, making lunch in the middle of the day, walking loose whenever he wanted, working on projects he cared about, writing without editing his soul, laughing more, worrying less. He realized none of those required millions. Most of them were already his. The trap wasn't the desire for money. The trap was believing money would buy what he'd never learned to give himself. Permission. To rest. To matter. To be. When people heard his story, they often asked, "So, how much do you make now?" He never gave a number. Not to be coy, but because it wasn't the right question. The better one? Are you free? Are you whole? Does your life make sense to your heart? Those were the metrics that mattered now. He still saved, still tracked spending, still had goals, but they were shaped by clarity, not by comparison. His financial life became less about status, more about stability. A quiet emergency fund, a modest investment account, some cash in envelopes, a sinking fund for future slow seasons. Simple, boring, effective. and freeing. One day, he sat down with Anna at their favorite cafe. She was sculpting again, after months of burnout. "I just want to make enough," she said. Jordan smiled. "What's enough?" She paused. "Enough to not feel afraid." That was it. The goal wasn't to be rich. The goal was to be unafraid. That week, he published a piece called "Why I Don't Care About Being Rich Anymore." In it, he wrote, "I used to want to be rich. Now I want to be resourced. I want money to be a tool, not a trophy. A compass, not a cage. I want money to make space for joy, not replace it. Because what's the point of having everything if you're still scared all the time?" It wasn't anti-wealth. It was anti-worship. He started seeing wealth differently, not as accumulation, but as access to time, to presence, to choice. He didn't want more for the sake of more. He wanted enough, then to share the rest. That mindset changed how he moved through the world. He tipped more. He gave more. He charged what felt fair, not what felt inflated. He bought less, but with intention. He knew how to budget for contentment now, not compensation. He didn't need to prove anything. He had peace. And peace, he found, was the most underrated currency of all. His bank balance went up and down, but his stress didn't, because he'd uncoupled money from meaning. He let money be money, not morality, not identity, not destiny, just paper, just digits, just a tool. And tools, he'd learned, are only useful if you know what you're building. He was building a life, not a lifestyle. And life didn't need to be expensive to be exquisite. It started with a message. Subject line, "Can you talk?" The name was familiar. Carmen Smith. They had interned together nearly a decade ago, both wide-eyed, over-caffeinated, eager to prove themselves in a world that barely looked up from spreadsheets. She'd stayed in the corporate world, rose fast. Now she was a senior marketing manager at a Fortune 500 company in New York. Her LinkedIn was polished. Her outfits, designer. Her smile, trademarked. But the message was raw. "Hey Jay, I've been following your journey. I don't really know how to say this, but I'm tired. Like soul tired. Can we talk? I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Jordan stared at the screen for a moment. He knew this message. Not the words. The weight. The kind that gathered behind the eyes after 40 Zoom calls in a week. The kind that lived in the bones, not the inbox. They scheduled a call for Friday. He made tea beforehand, cleared his schedule, lit a candle like he always did when the conversation would carry more than logistics. Carmen showed up in a black turtleneck, hair up, eyes heavy. "Hey," she said, then paused, then laughed nervously. "God, I feel like I'm in confession." Jordan smiled gently. "This is sacred space," he said, and meant it. She told him everything. The promotions, the migraines, the projects she didn't care about, the boss who praised her output but never knew her dog's name. "I feel like a machine that's starting to rust," she whispered. Jordan nodded. "I remember that rust." They talked for over 2 hours. He didn't pitch her a course, didn't tell her to sell everything, didn't act like Oaxaca was utopia. He asked questions, gentle ones, the ones nobody at work dared to ask. What do you miss about yourself? What part of your day feels the most alive? What would you do if failure weren't part of the equation? And finally, what's one thing you could do this week that would feel like a declaration of your own aliveness? Carmen paused, then said, almost in a whisper, "I think I need to stop pretending." The next day, she requested a mental health leave. It terrified her, but she did it anyway. 3 weeks of no meetings, no metrics, no deadlines, just air. And after the first week, she messaged Jordan. "I took myself to lunch. Alone. No phone. I remembered I like egg salad. I also remembered I don't want to go back." They talked again 2 weeks later. This time, her voice was different, softer, clearer. She told him she was giving her 60 days notice. No next job lined up, just an idea, a creative studio she'd been dreaming about since they were interns. "I want to help small businesses tell better stories," she said. "Authentic ones." Jordan grinned. "That's the best kind." She thanked him profusely, but he waved it off. "You did the brave part," he said. "You listened to yourself. That's the real work." Still, that moment stayed with him. The moment he saw someone wake up, not with a bang, but with a quiet, trembling yes. That moment did something to him. It lit a fuse. He began offering free one-on-one sessions, once a week. He called them exit hours. Not therapy, not coaching, just space to think aloud, to name the fear, to ask, what else might be possible? He spoke with teachers, nurses, accountants, graphic designers, a single dad who wanted to become a woodworker, a retail manager who dreamed of opening a community cafe. Each story was different, but the ache was the same. Is there another way to live? Jordan never gave answers. He just listened, held the silence, reflected the truths they were afraid to say out loud. And sometimes, just that was enough. He watched people reclaim their voices, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. They didn't all quit, but they questioned, and that was the beginning. Jordan wrote a piece about it called "The First Time I Helped Someone Quit." He ended it like this: helping someone leave a life that doesn't love them back is the holiest work I've ever done. Not because I saved them, but because I remind them they were never trapped, just afraid. And now, they're not. Carmen messaged him 6 months later. Her studio had launched. Her first client, a nonprofit supporting immigrant artists. "I cry every week," she said, "but they're good tears." She was still scared, still figuring it out, but she was herself again. And that, Jordan realized, was the goal all along. Not escape, not perfection, just return. Jordan turned 30 in silence. No party, no flight, no list of 30 before 30 scratched in a coffee-stained notebook. Just a quiet sunrise, a bowl of fruit, and Luz curled at his feet as he journaled. He didn't feel anxious about the milestone. Not the way he used to, back when 30 had loomed like a finish line, an age by which he was supposed to have it all together. But something had changed. He no longer saw his life as a checklist. Now it was a garden. And 30? That was just another planting season. He thought about what success meant to him 10 years ago. A job title, a condo, a 6-figure income, a partner with flawless skin and a degree from somewhere impressive. A life built for Instagram. Curated, pristine, glossy, but always beneath the surface. Empty. That vision had been passed down to him like scripture, not from malice, but from fear. His parents had wanted security, stability, respect, so they taught him what they knew. Work hard, don't complain, climb. He carried those values into every job, every relationship, every panic attack, until one day he stopped asking, "How do I succeed?" and started asking, "Why do I want to?" That question cracked him open, because the truth was, he didn't want to succeed on someone else's terms. He wanted to be well. Turning 30 wasn't scary anymore. It felt like an exhale, like letting go of a tight pair of shoes he'd outgrown years ago, but kept wearing out of habit. Now, barefoot, he walked differently, slower, surer. One morning, he sat with a pen in hand and wrote a new definition. Success is when my life matches my values. When I wake up excited. When I'm kind to myself. When I make decisions from love, not fear. When I laugh more than I scroll. When I honor my energy. When I help someone feel less alone. When I say I don't know and still feel whole. When I sleep well. That's success. That version of success couldn't be stolen. Couldn't be measured by quarterly earnings. Didn't require applause. It just was. He looked around at his life. No office. No suit. No performance reviews. But he had time. He had peace. He had a community that saw him. A dog who loved him. Readers who resonated with his truth. He had what he used to beg for, in different forms. But now, he didn't chase it. He lived it. He remembered something Anna said once over coffee. We're all trying to become the people our younger selves needed. He smiled, because in that moment, he realized. He had. He wrote a post that week called "Redefining Success at 30. It opened with a confession. "I used to think success was about being impressive. Now I think it's about being honest." He talked about the shame he used to carry when people asked him what he did. How he used to try to make his freelance life sound grander than it was. Until one day he just said, "I write things that help people remember who they are." And that was enough. The post went viral in a quiet way. Not a million likes, but a million nods. People wrote back with their own definitions. A mother in Vermont. Success is reading to my kids every night. A retired nurse in Michigan. Success is waking up without dread. A trans artist in Portugal. Success is being seen and not erased. Jordan printed those comments, taped them above his desk, not for ego, but as evidence that the revolution didn't have to be loud. Sometimes, it just looked like people choosing truth. He started asking everyone he met, "What does success mean to you now?" The answers made him weep sometimes. because they were so human, so beautiful, so free from performance. Later that month, he hosted a workshop online. The title was simple: Success Rewritten. Dozens of people showed up, not to be taught, but to be heard. They shared stories of walking away, of burning out, of starting over at 37, at 52, at 19, of becoming teachers, gardeners, caretakers, poets, of leaving six-figure jobs to work part-time and see their kids grow up, of unlearning, of choosing themselves. At the end, Jordan read a quote he'd written just for them. The world will always try to sell you a version of success that costs your soul. Let go, define your own, and live it without apology. He closed his laptop, lit a candle, fed loose. Then he stepped outside. It was golden hour. The streets buzzed. The air smelled like grilled corn and fresh clay. He wasn't rich, but he was successful, by his standards, and those were the only ones that mattered. It wasn't a big moment. There was no dramatic phone call, no fiery speech, no dramatic resignation letter waiting to be sent. It happened on a Tuesday, a quiet, ordinary Tuesday. Jordan had walked to the Mercado early, bought a bundle of cilantro, a wedge of cheese, and a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. Luz wagged her tail the whole way home, nose twitching at every corner like it was her first time on Earth. He brewed coffee slowly, opened his windows wide, and played a Nina Simone record that scratched gently in the background. Then he sat down at his desk and just breathed. No urgency, no catch-up, no dread clawing at his spine. Just the deep, startling presence of someone who had nothing to escape from. And that's when it hit him. He'd made it. Not in the flashy way, not in the way the world counts wins, but in a way that made returning impossible. He would never go back. Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. He didn't belong there anymore. It was strange to realize. For so long, the 9-to-5 had been his frame of reference, his identity, his structure, his safety net, and his invisible cage. Even in the early days of freelancing, there had been this secret voice. If this fails, you can always go back. If things get hard, the job market is still there. Just update your resume. But now, that door felt sealed, not with fear, but with peace. He didn't need a backup plan, because this was the plan. He thought about all the ways he'd measure his life before. Deadlines, performance reviews, traffic-filled commutes, salary negotiations that felt like begging in a suit. It all felt distant now, like a language he no longer spoke. He didn't miss the vocabulary. He liked this new one better. Slow mornings, projects that made him cry, clients who paid on time and respected boundaries, walks without destinations, creative joy not crushed by urgency. That day, a friend messaged him. A voice note. Hey, random question, but would you ever go back to a full-time job? Jordan laughed when he heard it, not because it was absurd, but because the answer felt so clear. He pressed record. No, he said simply, I wouldn't. And then, for the sake of clarity, added, I don't hate jobs. I just don't want to build a life I constantly have to recover from. He used to think never going back meant he had to be rich, secure, untouchable, but now he saw it differently. What protected him wasn't money, it was alignment. He had learned how to live on less, to manage his time, to say no, to set boundaries. He had systems, he had savings, he had skills, but more than anything, he had trust in himself. He remembered the early days, when even small expenses sent him spiraling, when he'd panic over inconsistent months, when he'd wake at 3 a.m. worried about health insurance. Now, he had calm, not because every problem disappeared, but because he'd changed his relationship to them. He faced them from the inside now, from groundedness, from capacity, from choice. He published a piece that week titled, The Day I Realized I'd Never Go Back. He wrote, Freedom doesn't mean you have no problems. It means your problems don't require you to abandon yourself anymore. I used to trade hours for money. Now I trade presence for purpose. And the returns are so much richer. The post didn't go viral, but it didn't need to. The people who needed it found it. A single mom juggling side hustles. A burned-out therapist taking a sabbatical. A former engineer starting a breathwork practice. They wrote him quietly. I didn't know this was possible. I've been scared to leave. I needed to hear this today. Jordan replied to each one, sometimes with resources, sometimes with just 2 words. You can. He no longer felt like a rebel, or a dropout, or someone who had opted out. He felt like someone who had finally opted in to his life fully. The next day, he walked through the town square with Luz. Children kicked a ball nearby. An abuela sold mango slices from a little cart. The bells rang out from the church tower, slow and steady. Jordan stopped to watch them for a moment, and in the back of his mind, he whispered, "This is it. This is the life I used to think I had to wait for. But it's here, and I get to keep it, because I chose it. Not with a windfall, not with a lottery ticket, not with a viral launch, but with tiny, stubborn, courageous choices, stacked one after another, until the world that used to own him couldn't find the door anymore." Luz wasn't just a dog. She was a heartbeat with 4 legs, a quiet companion who never needed convincing, a reason to go outside when the world felt too loud, a gentle reminder that presence, real presence, wasn't a skill. It was a surrender. Jordan didn't rescue her. She rescued him. He found her at crossroads. Literally. It was 3 weeks after he landed in Oaxaca. He was lost in the old part of town, trying to find the produce market. Google Maps kept rerouting. The heat was brutal. His phone was dying. Then he saw her. Small, golden brown, thin but bright-eyed, sitting in the shade of a wall like she'd been waiting for him all morning. No tag, no collar, just watching. She followed him, past the panaderia, past the children playing marbles on the cracked sidewalk, past his hesitation. That night, she curled up beside the door of his rented casita. Didn't bark, didn't whine, just waited. Jordan gave her water, then leftover rice and scrambled eggs. She licked his hand and laid down again. She stayed, and so did he. He named her Luz. It meant light. In the early days of freelancing, Jordan had a habit he couldn't shake, multitasking everything. He'd take calls while cooking. He'd write emails during dinner. He'd brainstorm content while walking. But Luz wouldn't have it. She demanded presence. If he rushed their walks, she slowed. If he was on his phone, she'd sit and wait until he looked up. If he worked too long without breaks, she'd paw his leg and stare him down until he stepped outside. She was never rude, only resolute, like a monk in fur. Eventually, Jordan stopped resisting. He started walking with his phone in his pocket, started breathing deeper as they strolled past jacaranda trees and taco stands, started noticing things again, the way kids giggled while chasing pigeons, the warmth of bread carts rolling by, the music leaking from open windows, laughter, heartbreak, salsa. Luz moved slowly, intentionally. He followed, and without realizing it, he began to heal. Presence didn't come naturally to him. He was a planner, a future tripper, a what-if thinker. But Luz didn't care about tomorrow's invoice or next week's algorithm shift. She cared about now. This scent, this sunbeam, this breeze. One afternoon, they sat under a tree in the square. Luz dozed off, tongue peeking out her mouth. Jordan watched her chest rise and fall, slow and peaceful. For the first time in years, he felt safe enough to be still. Not because everything was perfect, but because he wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't performing. He wasn't proving. He just was. And that was enough. He wrote in his journal, "Luz doesn't ask the day to earn its worth. She just wakes, stretches, finds joy in whatever moment offers itself next." He began applying that to his work. Instead of obsessing over results, he focused on presence in creation. He wrote with more texture, more breath, more truth. His audience noticed. "I don't know why," one reader commented, "but reading your work feels like a nap in the sun." That made him cry, because that, not virality, not metrics, was his new gold standard. Luz taught him more than presence. She taught him trust. She never hoarded food, never worried where her next walk would come from. She believed, without effort, that there would always be enough. Jordan wanted to live like that. Not careless, but careful, rooted in enoughness. When people asked him how he learned to slow down, to unplug, to be still, he pointed at Luz. "She's my mindfulness coach," he'd laugh. But he wasn't joking. They had rituals. Morning coffee on the porch while she sniffed the breeze. Midday walks to the park. Evening cuddles during golden hour naps. He didn't just live with Luz. He lived like her. Aware, soft-footed, curious. One day, he watched her chase butterflies for 5 full minutes. No purpose, no prize, just joy. And he realized, I don't need to monetize everything I love. That thought changed him. He'd been so conditioned to extract value. From time, from talent, from rest. But Luz reminded him, being alive is the value. He wrote a piece called What My Dog Taught Me About Money. It wasn't a joke. It was about presence, and how the richest moments of his life cost nothing. A walk, a breeze, a belly rub, a laugh. That post became one of his most shared, because it touched something real, something ancient, the hunger we all carry, not for wealth, but for peace. Luz was aging now, a little slower on the stairs, a bit more gray around her muzzle, but she was still teaching, still guiding, still anchoring him to the now. He didn't know how many years they had left together, but he knew this. She taught me how to come home to my life, not by changing everything, but by being with everything, fully, freely, tenderly. And that lesson, he realized, was worth more than any dollar he'd ever made. It was always this simple. Not easy, but simple. The life Jordan had built didn't announce itself. It didn't shout, didn't flash, didn't beg to be admired. It whispered, and he listened. The mornings began with silence now. No buzzing phone, no calendar clutter, just the soft sound of Luz's paws, the breeze rustling the curtains, and the smell of strong, earthy coffee. He had no office to rush to, no emails to defend his worth, no presentations to convince people he mattered. The proof of his life wasn't in metrics. It was in peace. That morning, as the sun slipped through the lace of his curtains, Jordan stepped outside barefoot. The tiles of the porch were cool, the birds already busy in the trees. He stood still, just breathing. No task, no urgency, just alive. For so long, he believed life needed to be dramatic to mean something. It had to be loud, big, worthy of applause. But now he understood. Quiet is the goal. The kind of quiet that holds joy gently, without squeezing. The kind of quiet that lets the soul speak. The kind that doesn't need a caption. He used to think he was escaping something. The job, the system, the rat race. But really, he was returning. To himself. In town, people knew him now. The writer with the dog. The quiet one who always smiled at street musicians. The guy who bought fruit every Saturday and tipped more than expected. He belonged. Not because of a role or a resume, but because he showed up. As himself. Everywhere. He no longer needed to be on. Didn't need to prove his value. In every room. He had enough. He was enough. That afternoon, he met Anna at the cafe. She was visiting from Mexico City, radiant and full of questions as always. They talked about everything and nothing. She asked him, "What's next for you?" Jordan stirred his tea, smiled, and said, "This." She blinked. "That's it." He nodded. "That's it." Not in resignation. In arrival. He used to need a 5-year plan, a roadmap, a benchmark. Now he just needed presence. He trusted that clarity would come, that life would open the next door when he was ready. There was no rush. He was already in the life he used to dream about. Anna said, "You've changed." Jordan laughed. "No, I've just remembered." On the walk home, Luz sniffed every corner like she was reading poetry. Jordan let her lead. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across the clay streets. The city glowed in gold and dust and music. He paused outside his home, looked up at the sky, and whispered, "Thank you." To no one. To everything. Inside, he sat at his desk, opened his journal, and wrote, "My life is quiet, but is not small. It holds multitudes. Freedom, friendship, purpose, breath. I no longer chase the world's idea of greatness. I chase what makes me feel alive. And that has made all the difference." He closed the book, turned off the light, and let the evening hold him. Epilogue. The letter he never sent. Months later, while decluttering, Jordan found an old draft email. Never sent. Dated 4 years back. The subject line, "I need to resign." It was addressed to his old boss. His finger hovered over the delete key, but instead, he opened it. The message was short, tired, formal, measured. He barely recognized the voice. But he remembered the pain, the doubt, the fear, the ache of trying to leave a life that didn't fit. He read it once more. Then, with gentle fingers, he rewrote a new message. "Dear Jordan, I'm proud of you. You were terrified, and you left anyway. You thought freedom was about money, but you found it in alignment. You thought success was about status, but you found it in stillness. You didn't run. You returned. And now, you are home." He hit save, then closed the laptop, and stepped back into the quiet life he'd earned. If this story moved you, If you've ever dreamed of breaking free, but didn't know where to start small. Start today. You don't need to wait for perfect. You just need to begin. And if you're ready to take that first step toward your own quiet, intentional life, subscribe to Dollar by Dollar. This is where stories like yours begin. And you? You are not alone.